walking the serpentine path, following the footsteps of the ancestors, walking the serpentine path, making our way back home. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho, hey ya, hey ya, hey ya, ho. Hey ya, hey, hey ya, ho. Following the serpentine path. Life. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Serpentine Path podcast. My name is Clairvoyant Seed, and I'm a plant walker, song keeper, word weaver, artisana, visual and performance artist, womb wisdom keeper, and your guide on this serpentine path of life. Together, we'll dive deep into all things related to plant medicine, ancestral reconnection, intergenerational healing, womb sovereignty and bodily autonomy, rites of passage and initiation, time travel, shape-shifting, dimension hopping, the reclamation of our collective earth-based practices, and the ongoing, never-ending cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Welcome to the serpentine path where the ancestors have called us back to. Let's start at the end and find our way back home together. Hello, everyone. Before I get into this week's episode with my guest, Nicole Granati, I wanted to jump in and drop a little note into the introduction to orient you guys. So, Nicole and I met in an online women's healthcare space called The Womb Room, which is run by a really incredible autonomous midwife named Kiddis Dashe. And we met in a program called Sovereign Cycles, which is a practitioner level training for women who are wanting to help support pregnancy prevention and pregnancy release with plants outside of the medical system. Kiddis also offers a very wide range of educational courses and resources throughout the year. What I want to note is that she has recently changed the name of the organization from the Womb Room to the Holy Well. So I just want you guys to know that if you are listening and you're super excited about the Womb Room and then you go online and you can't find the Womb Room, it's because it's been renamed to the Holy Well. So I will link that in the show notes if you are inspired by this conversation or if you are inspired by the upcoming episode that I have with Kiddis that will be released next week. So yeah, just dropping that in there, and now we can get on to the interview. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Serpentine Path podcast. Today, I have a wonderful guest who is going to be sharing about a lot of really important topics, things that I've gone into on the podcast before and things that I haven't yet touched on too much or gone deeply into. And so it is a really, really big pleasure of mine to welcome Nicole Granati to the show. Thank you so much, Nicole, for being here.
Yay. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So the question that I start off every interview with my guests is, if your ancestors were here with you now, which of course they always are, how would they introduce you and what role would they say that you play in your family lineage?
The first one that I'm seeing is my grandma, my maternal grandmother, um, who is just the coolest. She popped up first, and I'm looking at her, and she had like the sparkliest eyes, and her favorite like word to describe things was marvelous. Isn't it marvelous? She would say. So her introducing me, now she's been gone now many years, 13 years or something, from her body. But her way of introducing me, uh, would be, this is my granddaughter, Nikki. My family often calls me that, not Nicole, but this is my granddaughter Nikki. She's a singer, I think is what she would say. And my dad's parents would say, "Oh, this is our Nick." And she's David's daughter, our youngest son's daughter. And then they would say, my grandmother would say, she's the apple of her grandfather's eyes. To which he would say, oh, she's more like the sausage of my eyes, because he didn't really care for apples, but he did love sausage. So that was our little joke in the family. I think they would introduce me as living out in California, away from the family in Pennsylvania. It's funny to think about it because I feel like they wouldn't really know how to talk about what I would do for work, for quote work. But beyond that, other ancestors, I feel some connection to my great grandparents. I feel like elements of pride and interest from them. Um, the musical ones, which many of them were, I could see them being uh proud of my musical abilities.
Very sweet. And it's funny because like a lot of the women that I have on the show are all people who are involved in the healing arts in some way and generally like women's healthcare in some capacity. And then also almost all of them have like the most beautiful voices and songs.
Aw.
And it's something that they don't always speak about openly. Like if someone were to say like, what's the first thing that people would think about you? And it's rare that they say, oh, I'm a singer. And I love that that was kind of like the first thing that came up, especially with your grandmother saying, oh, that's the singer, because I
Mhm.
think our songs are so interwoven into the magic that we weave in all of our offerings. And I also come from a musical family and like multiple kind of generations back, and I feel like it's been a little bit lost, and I feel like I'm kind of the one that keeps it going, and it's beautiful. So I also always love this question because I feel the people's ancestors like, descending and like, ah ha ha ha, like, we get a chance to speak. So
Yeah. You have a beautiful voice. And I want to say I try to be in the practice of when people ask me what I do or what I am, I try to say like I'm an artist because I'm a healing artist and I'm a musician and I make art, get out of everything in my life and use creativity. So I feel like that's like a pretty broad way to say like also like a psychic minister or whatever that is. It's like ease into that part by just saying like I'm an artist.
yeah,
I'm
I
in the healing art.
yeah. No, and I feel that too, in that like I feel like I've gone through such a big phase of trying to separate all the different parts of myself and to say like, well, I'm an artist since I was like this big, my biggest identity was dancer. And then when I started my path with medicine, it really came, my voice came really online. But also that has nothing to do with what I do as, all of my womb wisdom stuff. And that has nothing to do with like all of this other things that I do. And I tried to kind of like find a specific niche to like fit myself into. And I feel the same way as you, which is just like art is infused in everything that I do because that is just who I am at my deepest core. And I love just the term like the healing arts. It brings back so much like aliveness and juiciness and creativity into something that can have pain in it, into something that can have a lot of fear, a lot of doubt, like a lot of anxiety, right? Health anxiety is it's so intense, and infusing that artistry is definitely something that I'm always trying to yeah, navigate within my own path. So and also, yeah, you don't want to freak people out by saying the thing right up front, like, I'm a psychic minister.
No, if I'm like, I'm a professional psychic, then people always think I'm just gonna like read them on the spot. I'm like, bro, we're like in the public bathroom. Like, no, yeah, we're not doing this here.
Right. Right.
Like, do you want
Well,
to book a session?
exactly. You're like, there's a professional part that you're forgetting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, or art witch, I used to say
Ooh,
to be mysterious.
I
What
love
is
that.
that?
Yeah. Well, I like to always give people a little bit of context as to how I meet my guests and how I'm kind of like weaving my community and also weaving the conversations that I like to bring to this podcast. So, you and I met in the womb room. And I also have, another episode that I have coming up with Kittis Dache, who is the creatrix of the womb room. And we met in Sovereign Cycles, which is a really incredible container that Kittis teaches that is all about plants for pregnancy prevention, as well as plants for pregnancy release, supporting abortion care outside of the medical system at home. And it is a really beautiful course and an intense course because you're moving through true conversations around sovereignty, around reproductive rights, around bodily autonomy, around navigating the safety of like government surveillance and the medical industrial complex, and death as well. You're like really sitting with a side of birth and pregnancy and womanhood that is death, which is not only abortion, but also miscarriage. We went into that a fair amount as well in this container of sovereign cycles. And you are one of the women who helps out a lot in the womb room with many different aspects of the organization. And you're also someone who, in every class, you have deep, deep medicine to share, both from your own lived experience, but also from all of the work that you've done in your psychic ministry work and your like spiritual midwifery work. And I've always appreciated the sides of the conversation that you bring into class. And one of the classes that you specifically taught was all about like spirit baby communication, and how that is not just something that's applicable like during the preconception period or during pregnancy for someone who wants to have a live birth, but how that's also deeply applicable within the process of pregnancy release, within the process of a miscarriage, after the fact, years later, if someone had a miscarriage or an abortion, and connecting with the spirits of those children. And so then I ended up doing like a spirit baby consultation with you, which was awesome and cleared up like so much for me. And then I continued getting to know you and continued kind of seeing that we have a lot of shared experiences in our lives, which I won't get super into, but it's been so cool to meet and connect with a woman like you and to learn from you. So I'd love to give you an opportunity now just to share a little bit about your work in this life. You can go as deep as you want. You can go into all of the weird, art witch shit that you want to. And the psychic ministry and the spiritual midwifery, sharing about any of that.
Thank you. Yeah, the womb room is a online community for women that's about spirituality and health and sisterhood, and it's been lovely having you be a part. Like it's just you're like you're like so well matched to be in that space with us, and I've been a part of it now for I don't know however long it's been around, 4 years. I don't know. We never know. Since 2021, I guess. And Yeah, I was doing psychic work before that. I was doing some like menstruation support, but I got really more so into it from personal experiences and then learning with kiddos, learning with the other women in there. And then the Sovereign Cycles program is, yeah, something that's really special and amazing. And I love being able to co-teach and lead in that space. And my work prior to that was in a clairvoyant training development program. There's a psychic seminary school in California, if you can believe it, where I've been a member, a student, and a staff member for like the last 10 years. So I got involved there in like a really cool serendipitous way, and it was yeah, it was like something that I'd been seeking for a long time, a way to like learn meditation techniques, a way to learn how to give my own energy to myself, heal myself. I kind of operated in the world as what I would call like an out of control healer. And this is also something you and I have talked about before, but like even as a young child, I was there were things that happened with me and with my family that were like changing things for the better. And one of the examples that I like to share is about that grandfather who I said I was the sausage of his eye. Um, he was like a chain smoker, and like he would smoke like filterless camels, like a pack or more a day. And when I was a 2-year-old, he tried to give me a kiss and I refused him. I said, no, not with that yucky stuff in your mouth. And the story goes, he took his pack of cigarettes and crushed them in his hand and threw them away. And he never smoked again. And he lived for like another 27 years or something. And so my family all said, like, they were like, that's because of you, Nick. Like you did that for him, which like kind of felt like really intense, you know, because I was just like being an innocent, real, honest child. But I think that and that like grandmother that I said would comment on my singing, she also is someone that said like that she wished she had the ability to express herself like I did. So there she is, this like old woman, mother of 7 children and many grandchildren and great grandchildren, and she would compliment me to my parents and say like I wish that I could express myself the way that Nick does. So I did have this like very loving grandparent support, and like they made me feel special, and I really feel like that helped me to know that there were like better ways to live than some of the ways I was living, that I learned, that I was influenced by culture, society, friends, other family members, etc. So I feel really grateful for that. And I feel like it's because of that being kind of infused into me as a young person that it has allowed me to be, I don't know, strong enough to be out of the broom closet, as they say, and um, to yeah, to go to psychic school, to teach at psychic school, to be out and open in that way. There's a lot of misconceptions, of course, but I got really into the women's health focus because of my own um, lifelong terrible periods, and that I in 2017 started to change in a huge way how I was interacting with myself, my body, my life, my uterus, um, and started piecing together symptoms and healing it outside of the medical system. So that's like a way I got my foot in the door, so to speak. And I started working with other women with menstrual stuff and doing ceremonies and making like oils that I would share, and um, doing hands-on work with women. And yeah, when I started in the womb room, I got more of like a practitioner's um, training. And I love the orientation that we have to being a practitioner there, because it's very similar to my psychic work training, where we're not going in and doing things for people. We are setting the space, setting the energy so that people can heal themselves. So for me, not having like a hierarchical authority telling me how to be spiritual and telling me how to heal allowed me to step into who I am as that for myself and other people. And that's like my goal with my work now.
Yeah, really cool. You do a lot of really cool work. And I want to touch on, yeah, that part of the practitioner level training. I feel like so many women, including myself, who are involved in the work, the kind of work that we do, there is that yeah, big like out of control healer vibes. And it's something I've had to really investigate in myself as well. It's an ongoing process, and spaces like the womb room with Kiddis are amazing. And then, there's a lot of other women who work in this realm. My other teachers, Rochelle Saliga, Wapio. It's this constant process of recognizing like the most the best way to be of service to others is to consistently be interrogating your motivations and your intentions, and what you were talking about that, like the top down hierarchy of healing, and like really expanding that out and not doing the work for anyone else, because one, it's not your job, two, it's absolutely impossible, three, it's actually not of service to anyone, right? And so it's awesome to see that there are now a lot of these spaces where women who do have like true innate beautiful healing gifts, as so many people do. I mean, I would say everyone really has the capacity to heal themselves and to be of service in some way, and to have that kind of mentorship and training in a more horizontal structure of like, I teach you, you teach me, right? And to not have that power over mentality as well, especially when we're talking about things as intimate as we're going to get into in this next part of the interview, which is like that death mother portal of miscarriage, of abortion, but also of pregnancy, of birth, of all of that. And so yeah, it of course goes hand in hand with like all of the psychic work, because there's also a lot of messy psychics who are like out here doing crazy manipulative stuff too. So, I mean, there's also crazy doctors who do that shit. So,
Yeah, I mean, I will tell people I'm a spiritual counselor and that I specialize in women's health, pregnancy, abortion, miscarriage, bereavement support. I feel like that, is like a pretty good overview for people to like, but it's like, I also like will give someone a reading about their money or their love life. So it is like a general psychic practice. And a large part of my work though is about yeah, people's relationships to their bodies and what it looks like when there's a pregnancy that someone has and does not want, or there's a pregnancy that someone really wants and it's not happening, or there's a baby that was really wanted and didn't make it. So um, yeah, and then my style is not what is perhaps thought of with a mainstream psychic, which is I'm not predicting anyone's future because I believe in everyone's ability to create their future. And who am I to predict it? You could change it. My intention is for you to know you could change it, actually. And how can you change it? And how can I help you to see how you can change it, right? And so I don't predict the future, nor do I give advice. Because if I start giving you advice, then I become your healer, and that's like a never-ending job. And I don't really want that responsibility. I want you to know what your energy is and what you can do with it. And I was reminded of, I think I might have shared this in a Sovereign Cycles live class, but I was in a group with my psychic school, and it was something that I was experiencing in a really intense way. And I was like, sobbing and like heaving, and like everyone else in the class was like, oh shit, is Nicole okay? And it was kind of like this out of control releasing that was happening a little bit for me. But I was allowing it to happen, so it wasn't really out of control. Like I could have, sucked it up and like stopped that, but I was like letting it happen because I felt safe in that room with those people. And then my teacher just came over and she put her hand on my shoulder and she told the rest of the class to like energetically get out of my space. And she said, she can heal herself. She can heal herself. And like that comes back to me so often when I feel like I'm freaking out, I'm overwhelmed, something feels too big, too hard. I remember that. And I'm like, I can heal myself, you know, and that's not to say I don't like talk to people or whatever, but there's a difference between constantly looking outside of ourselves for the answer and beginning to look within ourselves for our own information. So, yeah, there's also the process of learning that. So, yeah, that's what I feel really alive around, like knowing where we begin and everything else ends, right? Like there are spiritual energetic boundaries that we have, and everything for me on this side is like mine, and like owning it, using it, and then helping you to recognize where your boundaries are and how much power you have also, like how much power and creativity and potential you have. Sometimes we get buried under the energy of everything and everyone else. So,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what actual sovereignty is in all realms of life, but especially when it is applied to our health, when it's applied to reproductive rights and reproductive justice. All of these big conversations that we have, that's it right there. The sovereignty of understanding, like, I own my experience always. So, yeah, I'd love to talk about kind of what the topic of this interview is going to be today, all about, yeah, the death mother portal of miscarriage and pregnancy release, and also known as abortion for those who don't maybe know that term. And you yourself have been very open about your experience of pregnancy release. I think you had an interview on Kiddis podcast, right? The woman, I'll link that for people in the show notes, but you've been really open about also how it initiated you into the work of psychic midwifery that you now offer to your clients and community members. So I'd love to hear a little bit about, like, what else was going on during that time of your life that deepened you both into death work and womb work and tending to women during that really delicate and sacred time of choosing whether or not they're going to keep or release the soul of their unborn child.
yeah. So, I got pregnant one time. And I I was born outside the medical system. I was a home birth. That's actually how my grandma probably would introduce me. She's a singer and she was born at home in my cabin. I should have been. Anyways, so yeah, I was born and raised outside the medical system. I was tracking my cycle from like age 22, 23. No hormonal contraceptives. Very much, natural as I could be. Um, And yeah, I forgot I was ovulating one time. And the reason for that forgetting is multifaceted, but it was in the summer of 2020, which in the United States, in a big city, um I had just moved after having lived in the same place for many years by myself. I was living in a house with a partner and roommates and two of my dogs, one of whom was slowly dying. My paternal grandmother was also dying. So I was in this space of like what I call death watch. So every day checking to see if my dog was still breathing, every day checking my phone to see if I got an update about my grandmother across the country. So I was in the death portal, but I didn't know I was in the death portal because it was also like my whole life had just shut down, as all of ours did on one level or another for the most part. Um, we were like living in this like trauma bonded shock of this thing called COVID, right? So, um, I did make a choice. I had a vet come to my home and we euthanized my dog Fizz. And I had like a pretty interesting spiritual experience with that. And a week later, is when I forgot that I was fertile. And I just have to laugh at it because it's just so not. For me, it was just like unfathomable. But now I've helped so many women and I've learned with so many women like who have had these like oops experiences, like, oh wait, um, I see that it is also the influence for many of us of a spirit baby that would kind of, you know, you don't remember these things about your own body, right? They can be kind of, they can distract, basically. They can be distracting. Um, so yeah, a few weeks later when my period didn't come and I found out that I was pregnant, I was, offered a book about herbs. That was not going to help me. I didn't have a relationship with those herbs, and it felt like a no to look to herbs. I just didn't feel um drawn to them. And I was introduced to the procedure menstrual extraction, which is something that I had never heard of, and I was appalled that I had never heard of it. I'd been involved with, menstruation education, women's health. I had volunteered at like various like menstruation activism type educational events. I, read all the books, not all the books. I'd read many books, and I was pretty horrified that I had never heard of it, and I was kind of angry that I'd never heard of it. But when I learned about it, and I was like, oh, this could be another thing that I do outside the system, um, I felt like that was the right choice, and I allowed that procedure to happen, and it was very traumatic, very painful. A lot of really cool, beautiful things were also a part of that experience. Um, but what I know now is that at the before that procedure, I was operating in the energy of maidenhood. And on the other side, I had actually stepped into motherhood. And it took me a really long time to realize that that had happened. Maybe the better part of a year, if not a whole year, did it take me reading some other woman's experience of pregnancy release on Instagram and her referring to herself as a mother who had made a decision for her child in releasing that pregnancy. Did I start to unravel a little bit of what I was actually experiencing? 8 days after my procedure, my grandmother died. So, um, yeah, the grief was stacked. I remember thinking like, which grief should I grieve today? Like, I like dog, grandma, maidenhood is what I was grieving, but I didn't know. Um, I find abortion slash pregnancy release to be um, what I call the meeting of grief and relief. So it's kind of these opposing things that happen for many of us. I was very grateful and I was very relieved and I knew it was the right thing. And I was deeply sad and bereaved that it wasn't the right thing. And um, that's a lot to hold. And I didn't have sisterhood because we were on like a lockdown situation. I was in a space of instability. My whole life had been disrupted. So I would say, I do say that I did not receive adequate postpartum care, though I did get the advice to treat it like 40 days of bed rest, which I tried to do. But it was not like I was just being tended to and I could actually deeply rest. There were a lot of other things happening. Should I go more into postpartum now?
Yeah, I want to just touch on something really quick before we continue that. One, I mean, thank you for sharing about that that doorway that you said you went through of like before the menstrual extraction you were maiden and after you were mother. And it took seeing another woman speaking openly about it for you to recognize, oh my God, I went through my motherhood initiation, actually, right? And it's something that I think about a lot. I've never gone through the period of the process of either like having a miscarriage or a pregnancy release, but a lot of women in my life have, as a lot of us have women in our lives who have, whether they've been open about it or not. And I remember on like Mother's Day a few years ago, I was saying, like sending love to the mothers, the single mothers, sending love to the mothers who are really struggling, sending love to the mothers who, like lost children, sending love to the mothers of abortions. And a woman reached out and she was really upset with me. And she was like, I do not consider myself a mother. That was just a fetus. It was like a collection of cells. That was not a baby. That was not a soul. I'm not a mother to my abortion, which obviously, of course, I can understand why she feels that way for 1,001 reasons, right? There's one part of it that's just like, that's what specific parts of the pro-choice movement position abortion as, understandably, like they have to use that language and that divorce of spirit because that's what the pro-life movement uses so deeply is, pro-life, like there's a life inside of you. And so there's such a schism with that, right? But then there's also the cultural, what is the word, like schism or like cavern or just hole, like ripped open hole of those rites of passages that we don't have, which is exactly what you experienced. And what you were saying of like, should I grieve my dog? Should I grieve my grandma? Should I grieve this, that, the other thing? And what it actually was grieving your maidenhood because you can't go back through that door. You went through that initiation. And just because that pregnancy did not result in a live birth does not mean that you didn't give birth, right? And it's something that makes me so, so deeply sad because there's so many more layers and nuance and complexities to the conversation when it comes to the choice to release the life of an unborn child. That's what it is, to release a soul. And the fact that there's no middle ground for women to be able to say exactly what you said, which is, I know that this is a no. And also, where do I have space to grieve and to be seen and witnessed in the deep sadness of the fact that this had to be a no, right? Um,
It
and
wasn't until I got to the womb room,
yeah,
which was a long, it was a long time after that. I felt like I was just carrying all of this and I was just able to put it down.
yeah.
And I do want to say, like, not every woman is going to experience it in that way at all. Um, but I appreciate you pointing out the very clear differences in the pro-life, pro-choice ways of organizing this and like that we can kind of live in this nuance and in this other realm where I don't know if it had been presented to me in that way of like you're stepping into motherhood now, Nicole, if I would have made the same choice. So when I counsel women now, I share with them my experience and I share with them the complexity of still being deeply sad that I don't have whatever 3-year-old or whatever right now. And also being like, oh yes, like I'm so grateful that I made that choice, that I made the right decision, though it was a heartbreaking one.
And as you said, like every woman is going to feel differently about it. There are women who go through miscarriages and are like destroyed. There are women who go through miscarriages and are like, oh my God, yes, like my body is so intelligent. That was the exact thing that needed to happen, right? Like there are women who go through an abortion experience, and there's going to be 1,001 million different perspectives and embodied truths. And those are also going to shapeshift and transform throughout time as well. Um, yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your postpartum experience and something that we've talked about before, which is like when we think about the pro-choice movement and when we think about people who are like really fighting for abortion rights in terms of like out and protesting and have it plastered all over their social media and like my body my choice and all of these, that version of the abortion conversation, but then like who actually showed up for you out of your group of friends who are more from that like leftist anarchist like social justice culture, like did that did their politics align with what they did in practice for you?
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to talk about the dead baby. Actually, uh, regardless of how progressive or liberal or leftist my experience was that, um, and I don't know, I don't want to be all victimized here. I was also very aware that as these things were happening, that there were aspects of why they were happening that were related to past life karma and my own insecurities. And I felt untouchable. I felt like no one wanted to touch it. No one wanted to look. And I'm loud. I'm half Italian. And I said, my own grandmother said she wishes she could express herself like me, which was I think perhaps the compliment of a lifetime, especially when I feel like, I trigger people with, what I talk about. But I wanted to be seen. I wanted people to know what to do with me. I yelled at my then partner, like, Google how to help your partner after her abortion. Like, I shouldn't be telling you this. Like, I bet there's a Reddit thread, man. Like, I was exasperated with feeling like how hard I had to advocate for myself. And again, like, I had my own shame. But why? Why should I have that shame amongst the anarchist, anti-government freaks who are body autonomy? Yeah, like it was very eye-opening. It was disappointing. I was very angry and judgy. Um, but it really helped me see things more clearly, just in a more vast sense. Um, but I did take it personally. I felt hurt. I felt rejected. Um, I even went to like an apothecary in a big West Coast city and said, I had an abortion. It's making me emotional. I was like, I'm standing in this place with my then partner, and I'm like, I had an abortion a few weeks ago, a month ago, whatever it was. And I was like, I'm just tender and I just need some support. And it was like, as soon as I said the word, it's like they didn't want to touch it. And it wasn't like I was asking for herbs to release a pregnancy. I was like, I've already had the thing in the legal state that we're in, or like we're in a legal state right now. And I just felt really, again, like really shut down. Like this person didn't really the person the hippie in the herb shop, I felt like treated me the same way that some woman in an ER who was doing a vaginal ultrasound of me years prior, disconnected, eyes glazed over, like did not want to touch it, which is like cool, you know. Y'all work with the public. That's your way to get through it. That's pretty sad. um But I remember getting in the car with some like, you know, daily, like nourishing herbal blend. Not that they're going to have like the abortion aftercare herbal blend, but like, why don't they? Um, you come to my house for that, y'all. But yeah, like it was just, it was baffling. But what I also remember is a midwife who was a friend of a friend texted with me. We are strangers. She texted with me so lovingly, um, was available for whatever I needed. Another friend came and made soup while I napped. Another friend came and sat on my bed with me, and she had had a miscarriage the previous winter, and her due date ended up being the day of my abortion. So we had a sweetness and a bond. I had a long FaceTime conversation with another friend, and both of those women, I feel like those connections, that bonding allowed my body to release like further. It was like it was the following month, so my next bleed after the procedure, both of those women in the same day, or maybe it was like one day and then the next day, I ended up releasing like a huge chunk of something. And I totally related it to just having that experience of like being held by them. I'm getting goosebumps. It was miraculous. It was marvelous, in fact. So imagine like what it could have been if I was just having that like throughout instead of what I experienced, which was like just being alone in my bed a lot and feeling depleted and confused. And it also wasn't really until I started my next bleed after the procedure. So it was like if day one was the day of the menstrual extraction, I bled on day 25. And I bled uh black blood. It came gushing out of me. It burst out of me and dripped from my room to the bathroom. So, are you pro-choice? Do you want to help me to the bathroom when this is happening? Because this is actually what my release looked like. Like I called my mother from the bathtub because I bled straight through everything I was wearing. And my partner then, my then partner's down the street, and I'm calling him and I'm shaking. And in the bathtub for an hour, I labored that. And then on day 4 is when I bonded with those women in person and FaceTime and released this huge chunk of whatever mystery. We still don't know what it was. Um, so I love that I can be a woman now that can walk someone dripping blood from their bed to their bathtub. Like, no problem. And can I do that because I was that person? Or can I do that because I was that person and I didn't have somebody with me? Um, I'm very grateful for my mother. She also prepped me for things that I could expect after my release and told me things that no one else told me that were really, really helpful, such as I might have milk release from my breasts. And it was actually maybe 6 weeks after my release that my breasts were still so hard and painful, and I couldn't really comfortably move. And I went to a friend who's a body worker, and together we expressed my breasts, and dried hard milk came out of my nipples. Like I was only 7 weeks. Nobody, I mean, my mother told me that. Like, what a blessing. Um, so not every abortion is like that. And was mine like that because that was my path? Was mine like that because I had just made the choice to euthanize my dog, which I never thought I would do? Was it like that because I'd been watching things happen to my grandmother on her deathbed and then she died right after mine, which felt pretty intense. I remember thinking, like, I don't want to have a baby that's the replacement for my grandmother in the family. I don't really want to put pressure on my kid to have to be that for the family. Like, maybe there can just be some clean separation between that level of grief and a new baby coming in. I know that a baby in that way could be a blessing to many families, and that is true. I remember when I was pregnant, I could hear the voices of the women in my family and my ancestors, my female ancestors. Every baby's a blessing. And I was thinking, yes, this baby is a blessing, but not in the way that you mean that. Like I could see the medicine of being pregnant and feeling like it was a no. And lastly, I want to say that intentional pregnancy release abortion is very different from miscarriage. I did feel ostracized from how miscarriage, it's still no one wants to talk about the dead baby, miscarriage or abortion, like regardless. Um, but miscarriage is like there seemed to be way more room for support and care in that setting, which again is still abysmal and like not enough. But I felt even further removed from being allowed to grieve my abortion and to grieve what I went through and to grieve what could have been and all of that. But they are very different in many ways. So I do want to honor that they have overlapping similar ways of tending, but I really do honor the experience of miscarriage as being separate from intentional release.
Yeah, thank you for that and just sharing that whole process. I'm so grateful that you did have those people in your life who were able to show up for you, those women who you were able to connect with both in person and over FaceTime, your mother. I mean, there are women who like never tell their mothers about their abortion, right? And thank God that you did have that in that moment. And also thank God that you found people further down the line where there has been a spaciousness for the nuance, the gray areas, the messiness, the complexity, all of that, because most women, I would say, really never get even like a fraction of that. So thank God, truly. And also, yeah, what you said of like, are you really pro-choice? And what degree of responsibility are you willing to take on? It's something I think about a lot when it comes to midwifery care. And, everyone's like, oh, baby and birth, and oh, it's so exciting and it's so beautiful. But there's that double-sided coin of birth and death do not exist without one another, right? Even when it comes to the birth of a child is also the death of your maidenhood, the death of who you were before, right? The death of what your relationship looked like with your partner and what it's going to be now as parents.
The
And that
death of your pregnancy.
the death of your pregnancy. And that's all also applicable when we're speaking about a pregnancy that does not result in a live birth, whether that is abortion, whether that's miscarriage, whether that's stillbirth, right? All of that is really lacking in any kind of midwifery care with like birth doulas. I think what is her name? Samantha Zipporah, who's a really incredible abortion doula. She speaks a lot to that of like how there will be doulas who will be like, oh, she's miscarrying or oh, she's decided to have an abortion. Like, what do I do? And this woman is always like, well, how do you support people in birth? Like, it's the same as death. Like, you have the same tools, you just have to be able to apply it. And so, it's incredibly, I don't even want to say it's unfortunate that you had the experience that you had, because it was also what was meant to happen. It was the path, it was how it goes. And I think about this in all of my own womb dis-ease that I've moved through over like years, and all of the sexual abuse that I had to heal from, and all of the infections and like pelvic inflammatory disease and all that shit, it fucking sucked. I would never want to go through it again. I would never wish it on anyone. And also, that was the initiation that I had to have, right? In order to be able to do the work that I do now. And so, thank God that there are midwives like you who do know how to hold that space of that death portal, not just in a pregnancy, release, or an abortion, but in any aspect of life, of like, what does death mean? And to not be scared of it and to be able to look it in the face, right? Um, Something I'd love to ask you about is, you know, we both have criticisms, a lot of criticisms about the abortion industry, and specifically the way in which it downplays and disregards the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual weight of pregnancy release. So, as someone who's also pro choice and committed to pregnancy release support outside of the medical system, how would you support a woman who didn't receive the community care, witnessing, and ceremonial rite of passage into motherhood that her abortion initiated her into?
So, regardless of how long it's been, there can still be healing and ceremony and ritual and tending. Um, I've worked with couples who made a choice to have a release 10 years ago, and we do a thing. Um, my partner, who I had my release with, we um, um, around the time where I would have, if I'd gone full term, where I would have given birth, we did like well, I mentioned that chunk that came out of me. And I didn't know what to do with it, so we put it in a jar in the fridge, when all else fails. Um, when all else fails, put it in a jar in the fridge, guys. Words of wisdom. And there it sat. Like I didn't know what to do with it. I just didn't know. But we decided to do a ritual and we kind of did a recreation of what could have been in the menstrual extraction that would have made it better and easier on me, on him as well. Like he also went through this experience in his own way. It wasn't happening to his body, but we were definitely both pretty traumatized and triggered. Um, uh, so yeah, we just got a bunch of rose petals and tea and honey and apples and set up a yoni steam for me. And we had oils and we just did something lovely. We buried the chunk in the yard and had a little mini funeral, said a couple things, lit a candle, and just had him sit behind me while I did a steam and he massaged oils. And we started like a new like ritual with each other that we would kind of do regularly where he would get behind me and rub my shoulders um and we would do that like frequently too, like while I was steaming. So it was like this intentional kind of repatterning and reprogramming. Um so that's something that I could help guide people to do. And there's a lot of also like spirit work, clairvoyant work that can be done as well. For me, it was when that relationship ended, there was a lot of unwinding of our kind of family trees and the potential of life that was there, the potential of those families joining and a new person being a part of those families. When we split up, there was a lot of energetic tending that I did for myself. And that's also something that I've helped people do, women do, um, to make separations on an energy level from the spirit baby that was attached to the pregnancy, any other spirit babies that might have been hopeful to get a shot, and also, any spirit babies that the families send in too, like you ever know, you know, a parent that really wants to have a grandchild, they'd be like sending some spirit babies down and around and hanging out. So also just kind of like ending those cycles and helping there to be more resolution and more clarity. Those are some things, but also doing like hands-on ceremony work, womb work in that way too, just for like the literal physical holding of another woman. And the way that I do that is a kind of healing that I was trained in doing called hands-on healing, which is a combination of the laying on of hands and psychometry, which is like basically just being psychic with your hands. So in doing that too, identifying places in someone's body where like any of that energy is still kind of there and helping it to release. So there's a lot of things. Those are just a few.
And they're beautiful. And it's something in the interview that I did with Kiddist, I was asking her about, ceremony and ritual. And I think that people can make it into such a big thing. And they're like, well, I'm not a witch. I don't know. Ceremonialist, and there are so many things that we can do. I mean, anything is a ceremony, anything is ritual. When you set an intention, when you show up with your fullest presence, when you show up with an open heart, there's no wrong way to pray, right? There's no wrong way to grieve. There's no wrong way to mourn. There's no wrong way to also like celebrate what that death is then leading you into, that rebirth as well. There's no way to do it incorrectly. And I love kind of all of the different tools that you offered of like there's some things that you can do of just like a womb steam or massage or like working with roses or specific plants, specific herbs, whatever. The hands-on healing as well, like feeling held by another woman in a way that's deeply physically intimate but not sexual, and is like this way to show up for one another in the recognition of the enormity of what you've just been through, right?
Yeah, it's like for how for how enormous it is, like the smallest little thing can like work. It's kind of it's magic.
Yeah.
And I love setting up a steam for a woman. And yeah, I just like love setting up a room and setting up a steam and being like, okay, here, have at it. I'll check back in 20, 30 minutes. Like, here you go, and like process before and after, journal, whatever. Whatever feels good. But
Right.
I also just feel like so many, not just women, but like couples too, men too, are like actually really hungry for just the honoring of it. And having even like a funeral of sorts too. Because after my release, I released the baby spirit and the karma associated with that agreement, and it's like, okay, but that energy, the energy of the whole experience was affecting my relationship with my partner. It kind of became like I see relationships as like, like a romantic relationship. A monogamous romantic relationship is like two people and then the relationship. So there's like three energetic spaces, right? For me and my then partner, it was like Nicole, him, our relationship, and then this abortion experience that we like, and it was like taking over. So it's also kind of like letting some of that energy just calm down and release, and then people can be more clear about what they actually want to put in to their relationship, and does it want to be overshadowed by this experience that was shared? Because I also recognize that the relationship wasn't really the thing, like for either of us. We just kind of like we're in a pandemic and got pregnant, and then we were together for years, but it wasn't really like the thing, It wasn't like we were the one to each other. It was just like, well, I guess we're doing this. But then it was like that pregnancy and pregnancy release experience like made it so we just stayed together a lot longer than we probably would have. So,
And I feel like that's also applicable even with couples who don't end up ever getting pregnant or having any kind of pregnancy release or miscarriage or anything. That influence of spirit babies, I've moved through it myself, and the challenge that um occurs when you can't fully align with like your choice in things because there's that little spirit like floating over and coming in with its own energy, and it is painful, it's confusing. You're like, obviously I know in my mind that this is not something that I'm down for right now with this partner, maybe ever, whatever. It's just because of like this energy of this baby, though there's like so much that goes on. And so I love that aspect of the work that you offer too, for anybody who's listening. Like, you can go to Nicole not just for like bereavement care and spiritual midwifery in this way, but also if there's like some little spirit floating around and fucking up your dynamic, as it has done for me in the past. Like, it's a hard thing to move through. And I think honestly, at some point in the future, I'm going to do like a whole spirit baby episode, because it's such a deep topic that we could go into. But I want to give you a chance just to kind of share with people how they can connect with you, any offerings that you have. We're going to do like our separate Substack episode coming up where you're going to talk about healing your endometriosis through this like crazy past life timeline that you did, which I cannot wait to hear about. But yeah, anything that you want to offer to people in terms of your services, how they can find you, all that good stuff.
sure, yeah. So the baby spirit communication, well, a lot of things with my work, which I have it under the name Spiritual Hello. And Spiritual Hello is like a co-created business, okay? Like I was just really into spirit babies and working with them and learning about them and talking about them and how they relate to, pregnancies, etc. And then women started coming to me for the readings. Like I was like, sure, yeah, we could do a baby spirit reading. And now it's like one of the biggest offer. It's like I think maybe the most common offering that I do for people, like again, and for couples who are trying to conceive and who are excited to conceive or getting ready to conceive. So looking at baby spirits that are like in agreement with what each person and each couple is excited to bring in and experience. So there's a lot of baby spirit stuff going on over here with Spiritual Hello. Um, I also do the psychic touch hands-on healing ceremonies. They don't have to be womb related. They can be for any of like goals that anybody has. I also do animal communication. So if you have a question about a pet or a wild animal, or if you have, energetic sensitivity, if you have like interesting experiences with wild animals or animals, we can look at that. I do relationship readings and family dynamics and yeah, general psychic work.
Cool. I will say, as someone who has done a session with Nicole, it really, really helped clarify a lot of stuff for me and just brought me a lot of peace afterwards. And even like months after, there are things that continue to come up where it just clicks into place. But more than anything, it just brought me this sense of peace that I didn't know I was needing because of like specific parts of the story that I was like, oh my God, yeah, duh, how was I not seeing that, you know? So I can highly, highly recommend Nicole's services. It has been an incredible joy and pleasure to get into this conversation with you. I mean, it's deep stuff, it's intense stuff. It's it's all of that dark mother work, right? And it's beautiful. And I really honor the path that you've walked with it and all that you share with the women who come to you and the couples who come to you as well, the men who are also, as you said, hungry for this as well, and looping them into the conversation. So thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, everyone.